Good morning, everyone. My name is Kristin. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California and certified life coach. I run webinars kind of talking about and focusing in on relationship struggles. So from the very extreme where there's addiction and an extreme and consistent and chronic infidelity, lots of lying, double lives going on, all the way down to the trickling of just the more common issues that come up during the lifetime of a relationship. And when I say relationship, it's not always just within a primary romantic relationship. It also can be the communication and the feelings and the shame and the hurt that gets exchanged in a parent-child relationship, family members, coworkers, etc. So thanks for joining me today. Today, we are going to be talking about helping you understand the ins and outs and navigating where to get help. We have so many people writing sexandrelationshiphealing.com. They're coming to my website. Everyone is in a state of struggle right now. And there are many options for where to get help out there right now. Many of you are getting help, which is why you found this website, which is great. But many of you don't even know where to begin, how to get the help you need, etc. Or even, I think as clinicians ourselves, we take for granted the idea that you automatically know who we are, what our qualifications are, etc. And so I want to take the opportunity to kind of explain that to you. So first and foremost, let's talk about like mental health clinicians. There's lots of different names. Every single state has different names for mental health professionals. So in the state of California, and I see different letters after people's names from other states, so I'm not going to pretend like I know other states' licensing. So I'll mainly focus on what I know in California. There's licensed clinical social workers, there's a licensed marriage and family therapists, there are people who are considered psychologists because they have a doctorate. So LCSWs and LMFTs have master's degrees and they've gone through thousands of hours of licensing. And then there's also people who've gotten PhDs or PsyDs, so doctorates, and they've also gone through a ton of hours and licensing, and they're regulated, and we have continuing education and all that kind of stuff. We're strongly, strongly regulated, especially in the state of California. There's also a thing called life coaches. If you heard me say it in my introduction, I'm a certified life coach. Those are not regulated. So in the states, any of the nations, any of our states, there is no regulation system. So there's no board that's kind of regulating the minimum requirements of education and minimum requirements of hours and exams. So anyone that has a life coach certification usually has like a independent program that they're certified under, some kind of program. They are they're the board that overrides it and regulates it. So I always encourage people to kind of ask if they're certified life coaches, what's their background, like what's their experience that qualifies them to speak on this particular topic. So LCSWs, LMFTs, psychologists as well, PhDs, they all are allowed to be practicing. Oh, and the other issue too is that a lot of those state regulated licenses usually are qualified for you to get insurance reimbursement for it. So I'll get a lot of people who will say, hey, do you take this insurance? Do you take that insurance? And first of all, if they're out of state, I can't even see that person as a licensed therapist because my license is to the state of California. And so if they want insurance, they have to find somebody within their own state in order that is, takes their insurance, that's on their insurance panel. So I'm just trying to help you guys figure that out because a lot of people who are in crisis, money's tight and they can't necessarily pay cash. And so one of the requirements is if, they need to go through insurance, they have to find somebody local or at least within their state boundaries because that will allow them to be using their license in order to get the reimbursement. So I hope that gives some qualification for all of you. A mental health professional that you probably know of is a psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist is not a psychologist. It's not a therapist. It's not a me. They are medical doctors. So they are licensed under, they are basically licensed medical doctors, but they have a specialty. They did their residency in a psychiatric environment. So their main purpose is to assess, diagnose, and prescribe what we call psychotropic medication, right? So a licensed marriage and family therapist or like a psychologist, you can go to them and they can diagnose you with, you know, addictive type tendencies or depression or anxiety, or even let's say schizophrenia. And then a psychiatrist would be the one that would be prescribing you medication. The caveat to that is these days, general practitioners, so just even your home doctor sometimes will be the one that will prescribe you. So you'll go in for like a checkup and say, you know, I just found out my husband's cheating on me. I'm not sleeping at night. I have ruminating thoughts. I'm highly anxious. Can you give me something? And oftentimes your general practitioner will prescribe you some kind of medication. You know, that's above my pay grade and above my licensing. But I also know that psychiatrists, you know, at my treatment center, for instance, their entire education and purpose is finding out the newest, most recent psychotropic medications, the cutting edge. Our psychiatrists give genetic workup. So they test their genes to find out how their genes are going to respond to particular types of psychotropic medication. So if your intentions are to use a psychotropic medication for a long term, you might as well go to someone who's kind of an expert in it, so to speak. That's my 2 cents. I mean, I'm not licensed in that world, but that's my 2 cents. Another topic that usually falls under relationship crisis, or another professional that tends to fall or come with relationship crisis, are attorneys. So divorce attorneys, attorneys involved in custody battles, custodial stuff. Those obviously licensed mental health professionals and licensed psychiatrists or life coaches are not held or understand or are licensed to ever give any kind of legal advice. Attorneys are, you know, officially, they wear their hat in order to, you know, zealously defend their clients' particular needs, and they have their own specific purpose. So we all are supposed to kind of stay on our side of the street, appreciate another professional's wearing their hat and how they contribute to the process. So just be careful of people who try to transfer their expertise into it. I mean, maybe someone who's gone through a divorce, who's like a licensed therapist, might be able to speak from experience how their legal experience was, but they're not an attorney, so they can't give you legal advice of any kind. So when searching for therapists, and again, this is just my opinion, but it's just also my experience, and I have experience working in all things from private practice to outpatient programs to inpatient programs, and I'm going to define all of those for you. But I actually find there's a strong importance for someone to get help from someone who has a specialty in it. I guess a really quick equivalent is you wouldn't take your Mercedes to a Maserati dealer, you know, or you wouldn't take your Honda to a different dealer. It's always helpful when they have the software, they have the training, they have the equipment to properly and probably more effectively and efficiently assess the problems and treat them. So I always really strongly urge when people come seek me out and ask for help, I encourage them, if they're finding me and the betrayal trauma concepts really speak to them, then please seek out somebody. There's no official, like, I'm not a certified betrayal trauma therapist, right? I don't have a special name to it. But what I guess qualifies me to be experienced in that is my years of working in sex addiction and partners who are with sex addicts, chronic infidelity, single experiences of infidelity, families and loved ones uncovering these secret affairs or secret addictions, and the extreme devastation that betrayal it impacts them so negatively. So I would definitely want to find out what these therapists, psychologists, etc., what their specialties are, and ask them. And this is a really big, important topic. This is my opinion. If a professional cannot give you 10, 15 minutes to return a phone call or return an email and allow you to ask a few questions to better assess if that person is a good fit, if they have the right training and experience that you're looking for, maybe even an understanding of, okay, this is the crisis that's going on. This is the way I would respond to it. These are some of the steps that I take. This is my experience with this. I would move on to another therapist. That's just my opinion. I think everyone should have a few minutes to be able to ask some really important questions. You're seeking these people out in a time of crisis. And, sometimes you only get one shot at these crises kind of management experiences. You want to make sure you have a good, help navigator to move you along through that. So that's also why I send a lot of people to Tammy, because I know Tammy has a really great referral base of tried and true therapists that have shown that they know what they're talking about. They continue education in this topic, and they're very passionate about learning more and growing on this subject matter. So let's talk about the levels of care. A lot of you who are chiming in are probably in some kind of level of crisis, and there's always the big resounding question of, where should we get help? What level of care or help do we need? So let's talk about the levels of care. I guess the lowest level of care is what we call outpatient or private practice care. So those are the therapists, in the nice offices, so to speak, and you come and see them for 1 hour a week, or sometimes 2 1-hour-a-week sessions. It's considered the lowest level of care because, as you can imagine, in the state of like a crisis, like let's say you just found out there was infidelity, or you just uncovered an addiction, or you're at the brink of divorce, walking into an office 1 hour a week is usually not going to cut it. So often I consider private practice more like a maintenance of helping you stay stable and accountable to your growing process, not crisis management. But again, that's my opinion. So I think more for a crisis issue, that's not maybe a life-threatening issue, like this person is going to be arrested or get in a car accident or has life-threatening substance abuse issues, or there's domestic violence, physical violence concerns. So those immediate life-threatening issues, there are intensives, or there's also people will combine outpatient with group work or workshop work. So sexandrelationshiphealing.com is a perfect example. They have men's workshops where they're working on a very concrete, structured process of understanding their recovery path. And so they could be going to that, is it 1 time a week, I think? Or is it, yeah, so 1 time a week. And then they can be going to 12-step meetings to get other support or have a sponsor they're doing work with. And then they can maybe be doing outpatient work with a therapist to complement and enrich that process. Because that also could be used as, maybe comes up that he or she has a lot of child abuse or child trauma, that a therapist might be specially trained to go into attachment trauma, EMDR, somatic experiencing, some kind of evidence-based trauma treatment and specialty that is you'll only find like licensed therapists or psychologists who can do that kind of stuff. So you see how those things can kind of complement one or the other. So there's the outpatients, private practice, 1 or 2 times a week. Then there's the intensives. So I get a lot of clients who are, I just found out my partner's cheating. I think we're going to get divorced. They want to maybe do like a weekend intensive or a couple day intensive and assess the viability of the marriage. Maybe work towards a disclosure of some kind. That's basically when you work towards kind of telling the betrayed partner you give them a timeline of how you've acted out and what you've done, so you can start moving towards trust and reconciliation again. And then let me think what else. So intensives, right? So there's those 5-day-a-week intensives, there's 2-week intensives, but it's basically you spend a couple hours a day in an intense period of time to really deal with a major crisis issue. Assess, addiction, how bad is it? What kind of level of care do we need to go to from this point? So outpatient, intensive, workshops and groups. And then there's also intensive outpatient programs. So IOPs and partial hospitalization programs, those are called PHPs. So I'm going to call them IOPs and PHPs. These are, well, just so you know, these tend to be a lot more successful programs recently because they tend to be more insurance driven. I'm just giving you the honest truth, the transparent truth, is that a lot of IOPs and partial hospitalizations exist because insurance companies are more likely to pay for that level of care first. It tends to be less expensive. So if you have an initial addiction or marital issues or extreme trauma or extreme depression and anxiety, they're going to first often authorize intensive outpatient before they move on to a higher level of care, which is residential treatment. So IOPs and PHPs have varied schedules. Sometimes they meet about 3 hours a day. Sometimes they meet 5 hours a day. Sometimes people will stay at a sober living or like a halfway house or a house outside of their home while they're going to these IOPs and PHPs. The idea is that they'll be with their cohort. They'll get to kind of blend with their cohort and do groups, do individual, do trauma work, do neurofeedback, do all these kind of really intense work, but you might also have a job, so you need to just do an after work IOP, or sometimes IOPs and PHPs are stuff that you do after residential. So the next level of care is residential, so that your behaviors, your mental health state is so crisis and is in such a concerning state that you need to leave your environment to get healthier. So that's where I work. I work at a Malibu residential treatment center, and these people come from all over the world, and they stay 30 to 45 to 60 to 90 days. There's licensing for substance abuse. So there's some houses that focus solely, first and foremost, on addiction and then deal with trauma issues or mental health struggles such as anxiety, depression, let's even say borderline personality disorder, narcissism, sometimes schizophrenia or psychosis, but that depends. And those people get help for a long term because they're being overseen by a staff. They're getting daily or regular visits with doctors trying to assess their medication. They're getting oversight with nurses, lots of one-on-one time with therapists, lots of group time. Often their meals are made for them. So it's kind of a place where all they have to do is just focus on getting better. And then the higher level version of that, which is kind of basically considered, at least in California, the highest level of care where you could be at when someone's in the most extreme state, is a psychiatric hold. So in a locked unit. So in the state of California, we have things that are called 5150s, which is that basically you're a danger to yourself or others because you have attempted suicide, but failed, expressed a very extreme need to commit suicide or harm yourself, your mental health state, such as you're so psychotic that you cannot care for yourself or you're a danger to others. And that can also be psychosis triggered by substances. And often those locked psychiatric units will have, at least the one, I've worked at one for a while. They also had a detox unit, which is not locked, but it was just basically substance users would first go there to healthily and safely and medically detox off of their alcohol or their drugs. Opiates have really, can be deadly withdrawals, really uncomfortable. Alcohol often can be a deadly process of withdrawing from it. So psychiatric holds and detox facilities are essentially not really focused on mental health. There's some mental health components to it, but they're there for sometimes only 3 days, 4 days. And the sole purpose is to just give them medical care, some mental health support, and just getting them to a safe, stable state so they can move them on to an intensive outpatient program, partial hospitalization, residential treatment, etc. So those are kind of, at least in the state of California, and I don't think there's other kind of random things. There's like these wilderness boot camps that you've heard of where kids kind of get sent off to go camp and get off drugs and get their lives in order. There's other types of treatment, and maybe Tammy can kind of add, because A, she's in a different state, and B, you've been in the treatment world for a really long time too. But those are your that is your catalog of ways when you're like, my life is not working right now. I'm extremely depressed. I'm extremely anxious. I can't do this on my own. Those are your various catalog options to get help for yourself, for your children, for your family, as a couple, etc. And then go for it, Tammy. What do you have to add?
Well, so I really appreciate your, kind of picking this all apart, because, I answer the phone, and, we have people that are blindsided by, addiction, and they're going, I don't even know where to start. So
Right.
One of the things on sexandrelationshiphealing.com we've tried to do is have resources to help educate people as to what they're really dealing with. So, but when you talked about the states, people go, well, everything's on Zoom now, but you are correct. They still have to operate within their state licensure. So you're in California. Right now, you could work with any clients who are in California under your state licensure, and more than just for insurance purposes, it's for your licensure. At some point, right now things are a little more lax because of COVID, but at some point somebody's gonna, get hurt, or something's gonna happen, and there's gonna be a lawsuit. So for the therapists, it's imperative that they follow their state licensure. You also talked about coaching. I think coaching can be great, and a very supplemental thing. I really love it when therapists and coaches are working together. Again, as you said, a lot of it is not regulated, but even with licensure, the various states have different requirements. So, a marriage and family therapist, the training may be very similar in Florida, California, New York, whatever. But, what they're required to do to maintain the licensure varies from state to state. It's crazy, how much difference there is. And there's not reciprocity where, they can just, well, I'm licensed in California, so therefore I can work in Arizona. No, that's not how it works. So it's complicated. It's a broken system. There's politics behind it. No one's ever going to fix that. So you, as consumers, being educated as to what your therapist has, what your professional that you're reaching out to, what their credentials are, what their background is really, buyer be smart,
Yeah.
So coaching, I really see that as, you're here and I'm going to work with you on skills to move forward. Therapists are the ones that can help dig into the, the old trauma and things like that. And like you said, therapists have thousands of hours of, practical, overseen experience. There's internships, so there's all of this work. So they've worked really hard at being professionals. But like you said, you use the car analogy. I use my doctor. I go to my GP for basic things, my basic healthcare. When I had sinus surgery, I went to the specialist. He's messing with my face. He's messing with my stuff.
Right.
I wanted the guy who knew what he was doing with that, not just my general doctor that's going, well, I could do that, And so I think it's really important. And I get very concerned with GPs or anybody who's just going, here, take this prescription.
Right.
You don't know how your body's going to react to it. I'm aware of that genetic testing. I think it's amazing, because if my metabolism absorbs things far more slowly, I need a different medication than somebody who has, a quicker uptake on that. So, or a different dosing or whatever. I mean, there's so many nuances, and it's just a reality. But a doctor goes, well, I've had really good use of this prescription, or the prescription drug companies, make it, whatever. There's,
Right.
but,
There's
so it's
influence there.
yes. So here's the one I use all the time with everybody, and everybody gets the same thing. And that doesn't take the individuality.
And I understand, like, I'm not going to lie and pretend that like a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist, can often be more expensive than, let's say, just a basic licensed marriage and family therapist. That's because they've poured thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into their certification process. It's expensive. But I will say, I've been to a bunch of different therapists, and there is almost like an efficiency that happens when it's someone who looks through the lens of that more specific, specialized certification versus like a general practitioner or a general therapist, right? They're going to look through mood disorders and depression and anxiety and healthy communication and boundaries, and completely ignore that my husband's been, I'm making this up, but like snorting coke and having sex with prostitutes. Like, there's a reason why I'm really depressed and anxious. And if we don't if we're not trained to ask the right questions and kind of smell the bullshit, then the process is going to be even longer, and it's kind of wasted money. But that's my opinion.
Wasted
I think
money, but also additional pain. So you're dealing with your husband who's snorting coke, and so you're on some, like, you're calmer because you're on some medication, but all the chaos is still happening. So I 100% agree. Get the right fit. I can't tell you how many times I hear, he's working with a general therapist, and, he likes his therapist, but the therapist doesn't talk about addiction. He isn't holding them accountable, isn't doing cognitive behavioral therapy. The behavior hasn't stopped. So they're 2 years in, and the addict is going to a therapist once a week, likes his therapist, and probably is talking about the chaos of the past week, for the 50 minutes, and that's it. So how are you ever going to address those underlying issues that are the reason why the symptoms, the acting out, are happening? So I'm like, well, they're going to be in the rinse repeat, because it's just going to keep going on and on and on. And that's tragic and unnecessary. Getting the right help really makes a difference. So
talk about sober living for a minute. Okay.
Please.
Just so you guys also know, sober living is also unregulated. So I could turn my home into a sober living home today. So if your partner or you are headed to a sober living, it's extremely important that you ask, even though it's unregulated, there's some other kind of little certifications and, I don't know, communities, I guess, that approve certain sober livings. I'd even say maybe seek out residential treatment centers or PHPs and find out who they refer their clients to. Because all sober livings are not created equal, and you want to make sure they're highly structured, highly supervised. What are the requirements? What are the conditions that you get kicked out of sober living for? Because the people that are going into sober living need that. Absolutely. And by the way, I say sober living, but there's also people who come out of treatment with a lot of depression, anxiety, and so not really identifying as an addict, but still they're appropriate for sober living because they're not quite ready to go back home. They still need a lot of structuralized kind of oversight in their recovery, and that they're kind of getting up and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's what those type of sober livings are for.
A good sober living, yes, is that next step and gives them structure. But there's a lot of them that are just, kind of a place to park someone, and during COVID, and there's no regulations on, so yeah, do your homework. We try to give people the resources so that they can be successful in recovery, so that they and their loved ones aren't on, on that vicious circle of, it's painful. And, I hate hearing partners that are going like, it's been 5 years. And I'm like, he hasn't gotten enough help, and they're still sitting there going, I had yet another discovery. I'm like, he hasn't gotten the right amount of help, because it doesn't have to be that way. So
places like sexandrelationshiphealing.com, I have a lot of resources. There's workshops, etc. We are here to help you. You should not do this alone. You probably cannot do this alone, and we're here. to help you. It's my passion. It's what I love. And I want to see if I can help give you the language of the stuff that's been so intangible and so hard for you to grab at, especially when your neurobiology is just thrown into a tornado because your whole world's been turned upside down. Such a good point.
So there's another one in the chat. I recently discovered that my partner, who had been in initial recovery for about 4 months, also has co-occurring addiction, chemsex, that was never addressed in traditional. That's so typical. So it was never addressed in addiction rehab treatment. This is a 10-year addiction he has had. He seems to be taking steps to best gear himself for recovery. I question just how much of my own turmoil, hurt, and fear I have at this time. You have just provided some good insights that are also address this. So
this is such a problem. You're going to hear my extremely biased opinion, but I personally would never attend a residential treatment center without someone who specializes in intimacy disorders. Because remember, addiction in and of itself, or oftentimes chronic mental health struggles such as depression and anxiety, are all just symptoms of the fact that you have really, really unhealthy relationships with other people. So in the most extreme ways, so you just sexually act out, you pay for sex, you have pornography addictions, and that's the way you kind of eat peanut M&Ms to stop feeling hungry because you don't know how to act with people in a healthy, intimate, vulnerable way. Or you're experiencing lots of depression and anxiety because, you know, you love this partner who seems to always be disconnected from you, or you feel depression and anxiety because you're constantly acting out or flirting with or engaging with other people to get your needs met in a different way, lying, sneaking around, etc. So I can't tell you how often I will get clients that will be on their third treatment for suicidality, let's say, and I'll talk to them and find out they've had an I just think of this young client. He came in because he has meth addiction and he's really, really sad. And that's all the clinicians know. I talk to him, I find out he's had a pattern of regularly acting out with the GPS. So he goes out and he does these really dangerous, really physically destructive ways of meeting other men online and sexually engaging with them, but in a way that's been very dangerous to him. Under the influence, he's lost his jobs, he's gotten kicked out of school. So yes, meth addiction and extreme depression are parts of it, but the behaviors have to be talked about and incorporated and understood and discussed. Like, he had no idea. It's amazing our ability to defend our egos, to not really look at these behaviors.
compartmentalize.
I'm constantly, and the biggest problem, I'll just say this for a lot of therapists, because by the way, I was this therapist until I was trained in this way, is we don't want to go there. We don't want to ask how many people someone's had sex with lately. We don't want to ask if maybe your wife's actually having an affair because this is interesting behavior that's happening that's not making sense to us. We don't want to ask those really tough, uncomfortable questions, partly because I think we don't know what to do with them once they answer, but partly we're just a society that like kind of tiptoes around sex. But like when we're talking about mental health stuff, you got to go there straight, head on, talk about it, and go from there. So yeah, I'm sorry that's happened.
Yeah, and we hear that all the time, and we don't just have a track for this or a track for that or a group for whatever. You know, we're looking at those co-occurring addictions and the mental health aspects holistically, and you know that's what we have seen to be successful for these. So the final question that we'll take is any suggestions on how to approach conversations around getting the most appropriate care when the addict is extremely defensive and averse to these conversations?
Well, I mean, first, like I was saying about the brain science, that we learn best under stress, and fear and concern of losing something will make us hyper-focused, right? And so that's really important, is to assess and actually addiction therapists are trained in what they call motivational interviewing. And it's kind of this process of challenging clients to kind of help them see that one of their best friends, you know, they're acting out behavior or their substance of choice, that's like what their best buddy. They don't want to let go of it, but it's helping them see that it really actually isn't their best buddy, that it's destroyed more of their life and their relationships than they ever really wanted to realize, not to mention the physical damage. And so I think it's, sometimes you can go maybe as a couple there, as a couple initially, like, hey, let's go to a couples therapist to talk about this. Hey, I want to go to a 12-step meeting. Will you come with me? But sometimes it's also just, you know, figuring out how to draw the line of if you feel like this person is a concerning, unsafe, unhealthy person that's negatively impacting your life, I think you got to say so. You know, you have to share the way that the his or her behavior is impacting you, are impacting those that you care about, and what you really need to see them do so you can feel safe with them again.
And I think often coming from the approach of, I'm really concerned about you, you know, I can't sit and watch you destroy yourself. You know, you know, it's hurtful to me. I really care about you, but we get so many clients in treatment who are, you know, have those boundaries. You know, there's a negative consequence, and they may only come because their relationship is in danger. Once they get there, and we help them, like you talked about with the motivational interview, but we help them unpack what's really going on.
Right.
You know, they can get it, but initially they might just be coming just to, you know, I don't want that negative consequence. So addiction, like you said with the brain, it's like, it's so ingrained, and it's like, I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can. So until there's until the consequence is more negative than the need to change, which I find negative. I don't want to change. I don't want to change. I need to keep this, you know, but now this consequence is even worse. Okay, I better change. You know, that's, you know, typically what happens. But I really, you know, I've seen a lot of success when people come at it, you know, with love and caring. It's like, you know, it's not this is this. It's like, you know, you are hurting yourself. Here's, you know, here's this. And, you know, that's not okay for you. I worry about you, but it's also affecting, you know, every other aspect too. So we're out of time. Thank you, as always, Kristin. Thank you to all of you who joined us and gave us these great questions and feedback. We appreciate it. You can find Kristin at kristinsnowden.com, right?
Yep.
Okay. I was going to say, I should know that, but I only see you once a month, so it's harder to remember. But, and I do get, as you mentioned, you get, I have lots of people who write to me and say, Kristin Snowden suggested I reach out. So reach out to her, reach out to me, whatever. We want to help you get the right resources so that you can be successful on a recovery path. So
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining.
thanks. Bye-bye.